HAC. Right. You can...
Ah, there's a picture. That happened last time, though. Question of whether we get any volume. Oh, lots of moving about.
I think we have to have a shorter sermon today.
I hope so.
Oh, I'm being very irreverent.
Well, our restaurant lunch is 12:30.
Oh, yes, that's right.
But yesterday we had to wait, I don't know how long before we actually had the main dish.
Really?
Yeah. With all the more people than usual.
Yeah.
But it's a nice lunch usually. So.
Oh, that's good. Yes.
Nice lunch, nicely served.
Hello. Can you hear us, Harrow? Oop. Hello.
Oh.
Ah.
My goodness.
Adrian Cohen, worried about our view. I said I wasn't too worried about our view. It's more about being able to hear them.
I'm somewhat fearing a repeat of the Avanti. So just to check, Stephen, I suppose you also did the tour service for your bar mitzvah this
I
week
did.
as
Yes, I
well.
wouldn't be able to do this one in Hebrew at least. I've got the English.
No, no.
I've got the English.
That's
So I
right.
check.
Oh, that was
It will
incredible.
be
Yeah.
English only this week if I have to do it. Only had one bar mitzvah.
Paris had written so many books. So I just got hold of her first book.
Yeah. Oh, lost all clip. Oh dear. Comes again.
The High Holy Days, I suggest you don't set it up with the window.
Yeah, possibly. This is that's what Adrian was saying. So we'll have a.
You could do it the other way round.
Yeah.
With the desk over there, or you could do one of the ends. You don't want a window behind the camera.
Okay, can we do a sound check?
Yeah.
Tessie, do you wanna?
We can hear you.
Shabbat Shalom. Hands up if you can hear. Great. Lovely too.
Can you see us as well?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we'll start soon. I'll just make Shabbat Shalom, everybody here in person at the Harrow Rugby Club and those on Zoom. This is a learning curve ahead of the High Holy Days, so we will get our act together. I'm really just delighted that we're able to run this service. I think it's a good starting point. It's the first time we've been in this venue, and Michael as well will be leading. I've only seen him through a rectangular screen with a name on and a very tidy bookcase. We've got a slightly different setting. So I think it'd be appropriate if we said a Shechechiyanu for a new start. So including those on Zoom, Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Shechechiyanu, Yanu, Lazman Hazeh. And now I'm going to leave. Oh, we've got to sort out the mitzvahs. Could we, the three prayers on Zoom, the Well family, hand up. Vanya, the prayer for the community. I think I see Aoife's hand, and Israel. Stephen, so they're the three prayers. And I'm now, I don't think you need an introduction, but I'm going to introduce this. Michael, you've had links to this synagogue as well? I know I've asked you before. You want to
had my confirmation, very liberal 1966. So very long links. So is there somebody who's unmuted who should be muted because we're getting a bit of.
Yeah. Can we all mute on Zoom now?
If all of you who are on Zoom could mute, please. And if you're looking on gallery view on Zoom, I suggest you switch to speaker view. That will give you the best possible view of the service. There's probably a bit of silhouette because we have the window behind me, which is not ideal, but we'll see how we get on. So we're going to read this morning, Shabbat morning service 3, begins in Siddur Lev Chadash on page 117. So please, could you stand if you are with us? Standing and seating if you're on Zoom, please do whatever you feel comfortable with. And we'll begin. Linda will lead us in the singing of Matovu.
Matovu, 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 Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishnotecha Yisrael, Mishnotecha Yisrael, Va'ani Barov Hastecha Ahavo Ve'itecha Eshachave, Eshachave, Elohecha Hokochecha, Ve'yira'atecha, Elohecha Hokochecha, Ve'yira'atecha, Adonai ahavti ma'on beitecha, u'makol mishkan kavodecha, va'ani eshachave ve'ekra'a evrecha lifnei Adonai osi, va'ani tefilati lecha Adonai et ratzon Elohim berov chastecha, haneni be'emet yishecha.
Please be seated. And let's say together, we thank you, O God, for this new day, for morning sun and evening star, for flowering of tree and flowing of tide, for life-giving rains and cooling breezes, for the changing seasons, for the cycle of growth and decay, of life and death. We awake and behold the new day. O God, renew us unto life. Teach us to recognize your presence in creation. Grateful for your gifts, may we dedicate all our powers to your service. And the morning blessings, we praise you, eternal God, sovereign of the universe, for eyes to see. We praise you, eternal God, sovereign of the universe, for ears to hear. We praise you, eternal God, sovereign of the universe, for the joy of freedom. We praise you, eternal God, sovereign of the universe, for the power to rise. We praise you, eternal God, sovereign of the universe, for providing for all our needs. We praise you, eternal God, sovereign of the universe. We praise you, eternal God, sovereign of the universe, for the blessing of sleep and the privilege of waking to a new day. Baruch she'amar v'hayahu olam baruch hu. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech olam, mechulal b'fi amo, meshubach u'mefu'ar b'lshon chasidav v'avadav, bishvachot u'vizmirot, legadelecha v'namlichecha, malkenu yachid chei olamim, Baruch atah Adonai, melech mehulal v'tishbachot. We praise you, sovereign God, to whom all praise is due. And please turn the page to 120 for the Shabbat Psalm, Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbat.
Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbat, טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר לשמך עליון ולזמר לשמך עליון להגיד בבוקר חסדך ואמונתך בלילות עלי עשור ועלי נבר עלי היגיון בכינור מזמור שיר ליום השבת טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר לשמך עליון ולזמר לשמך עליון כי שימחתני אדוני בפועלך במעשה ידיך הרענן מה גדלו מעשיך אדוני מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך מזמור שיר ליום השבת טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר לשמך עליון ולזמר לשמך עליון צדיק אתה מעיד רק כארץ בלבנון יזכה גדולים בבית אדוני בחצרות אלוהינו יפריעו עוד ינובון בשיבה דשנים ורע נענים יהיו להגיד כי ישר אדוני תוריד ולא עלתה.
Please turn to page 135 for Yishtabach.
ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו, היה המלך הגדול והקדוש בשמיים ובארץ, כי לך אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, שיר ושבחה, הלל וזמרה, ברכות והודאות, מעתה ועד עולם, ברוך אתה אדוני, הבוקר בשירי זמרה.
Baruchu et Adonai Hamavorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamavorach le'olam. Amen.
Please be seated. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, yotze or uvarei choshech, oseh shalom uvarei et hakol, hameir la'aretz v'ladarim alecha barachamim, uvtuvo machadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reshit, ma'arabu ma'asecha Adonai, kolom b'hoch ma'asita, v'la ha'aretz kinyanecha, Titbarach Adonai Eloheinu al shevach ma'aseh yadecha, va'al ma'orei or she'asita, yifararucha selah, Baruch atah Adonai, yotzeh ha'ma'orot. We praise you, O God, creator of light. Great is your love for us, eternal God, and abundant your compassion. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you taught them the laws of life. So be gracious to us and teach us. Incline our hearts to hear your words, to know and understand, to learn and teach, and with love to uphold the truths of your Torah. Enlighten us with your teaching. Make us faithful to your commandments and wholehearted in the love and awe of your name. For in love you summon us to serve you and proclaim your unity Baruch Ata Adonai, Abocher Ba'amo Yisrael Be'ahava.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Leolam Va'ed.
Va'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavecha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol modecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anuchim etzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shenantam levanecha v'debatabam v'shivtecha b'veitecha v'lechtecha b'derech v'shofecha b'kumecha v'shatam la'ot al yodecha v'hayu totefot beinecha v'kutabtam al mezuzot beitecha v'ish'arecha. Please be seated. L'ma'an tizkaru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'tem kadoshim le'lachechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'Elohim ani Adonai Elohechem. Emet v'yatzi v'yashav v'chayam v'tov v'yafeh hadavar hazeh alenu le'olam va'ed. Emet she'ata hu Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu. Malkeinu melech avotenu. Yotzrenu so Yeshuatenu. Kvodenu umatzilenu me'olam hu shemecha. Ein Elohim zelatecha. Emet atahu rishon. V'atahu acharon. Umi baladecha ein lanu Moshiach. Mitzrayim galtanu Adonai Eloheinu, mi beit avadim peditanu, Moshe uMiriam, uvnei Yisrael lacha'anu shir rabbe simcha rabba, v'maruch ulam.
Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha neta b'kodesh nohora. Tehilot, Ohose, Ele, Adon Nohora, Tehilot, Ohose, Ele, Shira Kadasha, Shibakugalim, Lashim Kasefat Hayom, Yakad Kulam, Hodubim Liku, V'amru, Adonai, Yimloch, Leolam, Va'ed, Adonai, Yimloch, Leolam, Va'ed. To Yisrael, Kuwa be'ezrat Yisrael, Ko aleinu Adonai, Tzvaot Shemo, Kadosh Yisrael, Baruch atah Adonai, Kol Yisrael, Kol Yisrael, Amen.
Please stand for the tefillah on page 140. Adonai, Sefatai Tifta, Uriah Tehilate. Adonai, Sefatai Tifta, Uriah Tehilate. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu. Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov. Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora El Elyon. Gomer Chasadim Tovim B'Konei Hakol. V'Zocher Chasdei Avot V'Imahot. Mevigu Ela Livnei V'neihem. L'ma'an Shemo B'Ahava. Melech Ozeh Moshiach Magen. Baruch Atah Adonai. Magen Abraham V'Ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai. Machayim Itim Atah Rab Hoshia. Mashif Haruach Morit Hageshem. Mazriah Hashemesh Morit Hatal. Machalkel Chaim B'Chesed. Machayim Itim Barachamim Rabim. Somech Noflim Barofech Olim. Umatir Rasurim. Machayim Emunato Lishenei Afa. Micha Mocha Ba'al Geborot. Umidom Elach. Melech V'Mitu Machayim Matzmiah Yeshua. V'nemanata L'chayot Meitim. Baruch Atah Adonai. Machayei HaMeitim. Mekadesh et Shemcha Ba'olam. Kashem Shemakdishim Oto B'Shmei Marom. Kakatuv Al Yad Neviyecha.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot, Melech haaretz, Kevodo.
Kavodo Malei Olam.
Baruch Kavod Adonai, Mimakomo.
Mimkom Hamalkenu Tofia V'Timloch Aleinu. Ki Machakim Anachnu La.
Yimloch Adonai le'olam, Elohai Tzion, Ledor Vador, Hallelujah. Ledor Vador,
Ledor Vador,
Ledor Vador,
Ledor Vador,
Ledor Vador, Nagid Gadlecha. Ledor Vador,
Ledor Vador,
Ledor Vador, Ledor Vador, Nagid Gadlecha. Ulenexak Netzakim, Ulenexak Netzakim, Kedushatecha Nakdish. V'shibhaka Eloheinu, Mihipinu lo yamush, Leolam, Leolam va'ed. Ledor Vador, Ledor Vador, Ledor Vador, Nagid Gadlecha. Ledor Vador, Ledor Vador, Ledor Vador, Nagid Gadlecha. Baruch Atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. Baruch Atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh.
You inspired our ancestors to hallow this day for your service. And upon its coming, we pause to contemplate our life. We learn anew that we do not live by bread alone, but also by the spiritual nourishment we receive when we open ourselves to your influence. We thank you for the Sabbath day and for the opportunity it offers to enhance the quality of our lives. We thank you for its joy and for its peace. May our worship help us to take into our hearts its message of holiness and consecrate all our days by devotion to what is true, beautiful, and good.
Yismaku b'malachutacha, shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'korei, oneg Shabbat. Yismaku b'malachutacha, shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'korei, oneg Shabbat. Mekadeshei, Mekadeshei, Mekadeshei Shavi Shabbat. Kulam Yisbeu, Beyitangu, Beyitangu Mituveka Shabbat. Yismaku b'malachutacha, Shomre, 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 Shabbat V'Koreh, Onehek Shabbat, Yismaku B'Malakutecha, Shomre, 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 Shabbat V'Koreh, Onehek Shabbat, V'Hashbi, Ratzita Habo, V'Kidashto Shabbat, Emdat Yamim, Oto Karata Shabbat. Yitzeke Lamase, Lamase, Lamase Bereshit Shabbat. Zeke Lamase, Lamase, Lamase Bereshit Shabbat. Yismaku B'Malakutecha, Shomre, 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 Shabbat V'Koreh, Onehek Shabbat. Yismaku B'Malakutecha, Shomre, 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 Shabbat V'Koreh, Onehek Shabbat.
Eloheinu, Velohe Avotenu, Ritsev Dinuchatenu, Kadshenu b'mitzvotecha, v'tein chelkenu b'toratecha, Sabenu mituvecha, v'samchenu b'shuatecha, v'taheh libenu la'ovtecha be'emet, v'chanhilenu Adonai Eloheinu b'ahava, v'ratzon Shabbat kodshecha, v'yanuchu v'Yisrael, Mekadshe Shemecha, Baruch Atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. Eternal God, be gracious to your people Israel, and in your love accept their prayers. May our worship now and always be acceptable in your sight. We praise you, O God, and alone we worship in reverence. Modim anachnu la. Shatahu Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu le'olam va'ed. Sur chayenu magen yishenu atahu ledor vador. Nedelacha anesaper tilatecha al chayenu hamsamin biyadecha va'al nishvotenu hapurod va'al nisecha shebachol yom imanu va'al niflotecha v'tovatecha shebachol eitere v'voche v'sohrayim. Baruch atah Adonai, Hatov Shemcha, Lahana El Lehodot.
Sim Shalom, Tova Uvracha. Sim Shalom, Tova Uvracha. Sim Shalom, Tova Uvracha. Sim Shalom, Tova Uvracha. Kein v'chesed v'rachamim. Kein v'chesed v'rachamim. V'rachamim. Sim shalom. Tova uvracha. Sim shalom. Tova uvracha. Aleinu va'al kol Yisrael. Aleinu va'al kol Yisrael. Amecha. Sim shalom. Tova uvracha. Sim shalom. Tova uvracha. Tova uvracha.
Okay. Barakenu avinu kulanu ke'echad ba'or panecha. Ki ba'or panecha natata lanu Adonai Eloheinu. Torat chayim ba'achavat chesed u'tzedakah v'racha v'rachamim v'chayim v'shalom. V'tov beinecha levarech et amcha Yisrael ve'et kol ha'amim. V'chol eit v'chol sha'a b'shlomecha. Baruch atah Adonai osei hashalom. A time for our own thoughts and quiet prayers. Ose Shalom.
Say shalom bimramav, say shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol bnei Adam. Say shalom, say shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Say shalom, say shalom. Shalom aleinu v'yakol Yisrael. Yahaseh shalom, Yahaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu v'yakol Yisrael. Yahaseh shalom, Yahaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu v'yakol bnei Adam.
Just before we turn to our Torah service, I'd like to draw your attention to a little feature of Siddur Lev Chadash. It's almost like a secret feature. You may know this already. If you look at the Oseh Shalom prayer, which we've just read, and you look at the word Kol in the middle line, Kol Yisrael, you will see that the vowel under the letter Kaf in Kol, instead of being printed by a little T, it's a line with a little dot below it. Now you need pretty good eyesight to notice it, but it's quite deliberate. It's there to tell you that that vowel is an O and not an A kamatz katan. And it's printed like that in this book every time it is to be pronounced O. And if you are leading a service, it's a very useful feature of the book to know about, and one which is very difficult to spot if you don't know it's there.
I was thinking of it as a line with a gap.
A line with a gap, okay. So we continue with our Torah service on page 481. Please stand.
Ein kamoka Elohim Adonai ve'ein kamasecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch li'olam va'ed. Adonai osliam hoyitein, Adonai yevaret et amo v'shalom.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Gadol Shemo. Gadol Adonai iti, L'ramamav Shemo Yaktav, Lecha Adonai, Hagedula, V'Hagevura, V'Hatiferet, V'Hanetzach, V'Hahod, Ki Hod Hashamayim U'Va'aretz, Lecha Adonai HaMamlaka V'Mitnaseh, L'Kol L'Rosh.
I'll do a little introduction first. So please be seated for a moment, just to say what we're reading this morning. The Sedra is called Chukat, which means a law. Actually, chok is always a mysterious law, one without any reason given. And this is one of the, perhaps the most mysterious in the Torah. It's a very unusual passage, so much so that perhaps you may not have heard it before. Hopefully you can see it on your sheet. And do we have it on Zoom?
Yes.
Yeah, so if we could put it up, that would be good on the screen share. In English, it's most often called the red heifer, though I prefer to call it the red cow, which is what it's about. And Rabbi Daniela Tau and I have been studying this Sedra for 3 years now as part of the Lielbeck College Chumash project. And we spent many meetings poring over commentaries and explanations. And we read that this section of the Torah is considered to be so mysterious that not even the wise King Solomon could understand it. But when we came to Rav Sadia Gaon's comment, who wrote, "It's a command issued for no other reason than to reward us for obeying it," and then we saw red, so to speak. There had to be more to it than that. So we started to look at surrounding ancient cultures, and we found academic articles describing parallels in ancient Egyptian, Canaanite, and Indian cultures. And I hope that we made a little bit of sense of it. This is one of those points in the Torah where religion meets magic. Magic being a person who creates an illusion for you, which you pretend may be real, and religion being when you're doing sometimes something similar, but in a social context and for the worship of God. The most important points in the story of the red cow, the law of the red cow, can be very simply explained. Think of Halloween and the way we make fun out of ghosts and haunting and death and pumpkins with holes cut for the eyes. Fun because if we didn't laugh about it, we'd actually be scared. People have always been afraid of dead bodies, and that fear was very strong in the ancient world. People who'd been in contact with a dead body thought that it might infect them in some way. And so a ritual was designed to cleanse them of these fears, and also perhaps to distance the people who'd come out of Egypt from the ancestor worship, which was very much a part of ancient Egyptian religion. Moses and Aaron are instructed to find a cow which is completely red, to cremate it outside the camp, i.e. not on their normal altar, but just in some place in the middle of the desert, and to store the ash. And then when someone came along who'd been in contact with a corpse, they got sprinkled with some water, which had a tiny bit of this special ash in it. Well, why a cow? Cows or cattle are sacred in many ancient cultures. In India, ash from cow dung is still widely used as a cleansing agent. And since cows are sacred to Hindus and fire is regarded as purifying, cow dung ash is considered extremely pure. But why a red cow? In Hebrew, the word red is adumah. It's the same Hebrew root as dam, meaning blood, blood which gives life, and Adam, meaning a human being. And Adam, says the story of creation, was made from Adamah, earth. So there's something special about this color, red. Esau spotted it when he came home from hunting, and his brother Jacob had made a lentil stew, and Esau says to him, "Give me some of that red, red stuff." From blood comes life. But red is also often seen as a bad color. And in European culture before the 20th century, haven't heard of it recently, but it was definitely there in older sources. Red hair was often seen as a particularly Jewish trait. And indeed, the traitor Judas in the Christian story was often depicted with red hair in Spanish and Italian art. And throughout history, redheads have often been depicted as angry or violent. Red or yellow are colors of fire, seen as purifying. So burning this red cow was symbolically getting rid of that danger. Well, I think I've said enough to get us started on the story. I'm going to invite Janet, please, to read the translation. The translation covers the first bit of the narrative, which is where the cow is burnt and the ashes put away, and just the beginning of the second bit, which is how you use the ash when someone comes along who needs cleansing. And I'd like you to listen, please, for my quiz question. In this burning of the cow, how many people are involved? So see if you can spot that while the translation is read.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamavarach.
Baruch Adonai Habarach.
Baruch Adonai hamavarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'notan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. And the Eternal One spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "This is the ritual law which the Eternal One has commanded, saying, instruct the children of Israel that they bring you a red cow without blemish, in which there is no defect and on which no yoke has been laid. And you shall give her to Eleazar the priest, and she shall be taken outside the camp and slaughtered in his presence. And Eleazar the priest shall take some of her blood with his finger and sprinkle it 7 times towards the front of the tent of meeting. And the cow shall be burned in his sight. Her hide, her flesh, and her blood, together with her dung, shall be burned. And the priest shall take cedar wood, hyssop, and crimson stuff, and cast them into the midst of the fire burning the cow. Then the priest shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water, and afterwards the priest may come into the camp, but he shall be impure until the evening. The one who performed the burning shall also wash their clothes in water, bathe their body in water, and be impure until the evening. Another person who is pure shall gather up the ashes of the cow and put them outside the camp in a pure place to be kept for cleansing water for the congregation of the children of Israel. It is for purification from sin. The one who gathers up the ashes of the cow shall also wash their clothes and be impure until the evening, and it shall be a law forever for the children of Israel and for the stranger who resides among them. Anyone who touches the corpse of any human being shall be impure for 7 days. They shall purify themselves with the ashes on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, and then will be pure. But if they do not purify themselves on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, they shall not be pure. Whoever touches a corpse, the body of any person who has died, and does not purify themselves, they have defiled the tabernacle of the Eternal One. That soul shall be cut off from Israel. Since the cleansing water was not sprinkled on them, they remain impure. Their impurity is still upon them.
V'daber Adonai el Moshe v'el Haron le'emor, Zot chukat haTorah asher tziva Adonai le'emor, V'daber al bnei Yisrael v'yikachu elecha farad u'mat mina asher ein ba'amum, Asher lo Allah alecha o unatatam ota el Elazar hakohen lahotzi ota michutz lamachane v'shachat ota lefanav lakach Elazar hakohen midamav etzba'o v'hizal nokach neochem moed midama sheva pa'amim v'sarat et hapara leinav etorah ve'basarav yetama al pisha Yisro V'lakach hakohen eitz erez v'zo shnei tolad v'hishlich el tok sarefat hapara v'chibes bagadav hakohen v'rachatz basaro b'mayim v'chayavo el hamachanei v'timei hakohen ata'arev v'asorei kota yekabes bagadav b'mayim v'rachatz basaro b'mayim v'tamei ata'arev v'asav yishtacho V'yiteka hapara v'hiniach michutz lamachane v'chom tacho v'hayata l'adat b'nei Yisrael l'mishmeret l'mei nida katati v'chibes ha'osei et hapar V'kibet ha'osei v'tapa et that's it. V'hibet ha'osei v'efe ha'para et b'katav v'timei ata'arev v'hayata livnei Yisrael v'lageh hagav v'tocham v'chuchat olam Hanogea b'meit l'chol nefesh adam v'timei shivat yamim hu yitchata bo b'yom hashishi v'yom hashvi yitcha v'im lo yitchata b'yom hashishi v'yom hashvi lo yitcha Kol hanogea b'meit b'nefesh Adam asher yamod v'lo yitchata b'mishkan Adonai timei v'nechota hanefesh hahi meYisrael ki mei nida lo zorak alav tamei ye'ot tumato bo.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher notan lanu torat emet, v'chayei olam notar b'tachenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Good. Thank you very much. Now, those on Zoom are welcome to take part. How many people did you spot who were taking part? 5. Interesting.
Seven.
Okay.
Seven.
7. Wow. Any advance on 7? I thought it was 3. You thought it was 3. I suppose it includes, if you include Moses and Aaron at the beginning. I think 3 in the actual ritual. There's Eliezer the priest, who is in charge of it, and then clearly he had someone there to do the cremating and somebody to gather up the ash.
Someone to slaughter.
Yes, that could be someone to slaughter. You're right. It could be another person. If you go to service in a crematorium, you will have minister reading the prayers. You will have staff who are putting the body into the cremator, and you will have people gathering the ash. So it's not so very different from stuff that happens today, even though it appears so weird. So let's carry on.
Natan Torah le'amo Yisrael Pilidushato.
Alan, please, our Haftarah.
The Haftarah reading this Shabbat is from the book of Judges, chapter 11, verses 1 to 28. I must confess that I had to look up what the book of Judges is all about. So I consulted, who else? Google, which reminded me that it's the 7th book of the Hebrew Bible, after the 5 books of the Torah and Joshua. It covers the time between the conquest described in the book of Joshua and the establishment of a kingdom in the books of Samuel, during which biblical judges served as temporary leaders. Chapter 11 tells the story of Jephthah, a man of humble beginnings who rises to greatness. I'm reading this Haftarah in loving memory of my father, Reggie, who passed away at this time of the year exactly 50 years ago. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar b'nviim tovim, v'ratzah v'divreihem han'emerim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai, haboher b'torah, u'v'moshe avdo, u'v'Yisrael amo, u'v'nvi'ei ha'emet v'tzedek. Jephthah the Gileadite was a mighty warrior who was the son of a prostitute. Jephthah's father was Gilead. But Gilead also had sons by his wife. And when the wife's sons grew up, they drove Jephthah away. They said to him, "You shall have no share in our father's property, for you are the son of another woman." So Jephthah fled from his brothers and settled in the land of Tob, where a gang of scoundrels gathered around him and went out raiding with him. Sometime later, the Ammonites went to war against Israel. And when the Ammonites attacked Israel, the elders of Gilead went to bring Jephthah back from the Tob country. They said to Jephthah, "Come, be our chief, so that we can fight the Ammonites." Jephthah replied to the elders of Gilead, "You are the very people who rejected me and drove me out from my father's house. How can you come to me now when you are in trouble?" The elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, "Honestly, we are turning back to you now. Come with us and fight the Ammonites, and you will be head over all the inhabitants of Gilead." Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, "Very well, if you bring me back to fight the Ammonites and the Eternal One delivers them to me, I am to be your commander." And the elders of Gilead answered Jephthah, "The Eternal One shall be witness between us. We will do just as you have said." Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him their head and commander. And Jephthah repeated all his words before the Eternal One at Mizpah. Jephthah then sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites, saying, "What do you have against me that you have come to make war on my country?" The king of the Ammonites replied to Jephthah's messengers, "When Israel came from Egypt, they seized my land, from the Arnon to the Jabbok, as far as the Jordan. Now give it back peaceably." Jephthah again sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites. He said to him, and it's a long speech. This is what Jephthah said. Israel did not seize the land of Moab or the land of the Ammonites. When they left Egypt, Israel traveled through the wilderness to the Sea of Reeds and went on to Kadesh. Israel then sent messengers to the king of Edom saying, "Allow us to cross your country." But the king of Edom would not consent. They also sent a mission to the king of Moab, and he refused. So Israel, after staying at Kadesh, traveled on through the wilderness, skirting the land of Edom and the land of Moab. They kept to the east of the land of Moab until they camped on the other side of the Arnon. And since Moab's border was at the Arnon, they never entered Moabite territory. Then Israel sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, the king of Heshbon. Israel said to him, "Allow us to pass through your country to our homeland." But Sihon did not trust Israel to pass through his territory. Sihon mustered all his troops, and they encamped at Jahaz and fought with Israel. But the Eternal One, the God of Israel, delivered Sihon and all his troops into Israel's hands, and they defeated them. Israel took possession of all the land of the Amorites, the inhabitants of that country. Thus they possessed all the territory of the Amorites, from the Arnon to the Jabbok, and from the wilderness to the Jordan. Now, since the Eternal One, the God of Israel, has driven the Amorites out before the Israelite people, what right have you to take over their land? Will you not take what your God Chemosh gives you? Likewise, we will possess everything that the Eternal, our God, has given us. Besides, are you any better than Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab? Did he start a quarrel with Israel or go to war with them? For 300 years, Israel has inhabited Heshbon and its dependencies, Aroer and its dependencies, and all the towns along the Arnon. Why did you not try to retake them during all this time? I have done you no wrong, yet you are doing me wrong by waging war against me. May the Eternal One, who judges, decide today between the Israelites and the Ammonites. But the king of the Ammonites paid no heed to the message that Jephthah sent him. That's the end of my reading, but I can't leave the story there. The chapter goes on to tell us that Jephthah vows to God that if he delivers the Ammonites into his hands, he will offer as a burnt offering whoever comes out of his house to meet him on his safe return. Jephthah defeats the Ammonites, returns home, and the first person to greet him is his daughter, his only child. Chapter 11, if you want to know how it all ends. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, tzur kol ha'olamim, tzaddik b'chol hadarot, ha'el ha'ne'eman, ha'omer v'oseh, ha'mdaber u'mekayem shekol devarav emet v'tzedek. Al ha'torah, v'al ha'avodah, v'al ha'ne'im, v'al yom ha'shabbat hazeh, shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu, likdusha v'limnucha, v'chavod u'letiferet, Al hakol Adonai Eloheinu, anachdim modim lach, u'mevarehim otach, yitbarach shimha b'fi kol chai, tamid le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh ha'shabbat.
So we come now to the community prayers and the prayer for Ukraine.
Eternal God, whose dominion embraces the universe, we ask your blessing for our sovereign lady, Queen Elizabeth, and all the royal family, for those who govern our country and all who influence the quality of its national life. Make them conscious of their responsibility and teach them to exercise it in accordance with your will. May we all help to fashion in this country a society that excels in freedom and justice, tolerance and compassion, so that it may be a force for righteousness and peace in the life of humanity.
Eternal God, as you blessed our ancestors in generations past, bless now this congregation, its leaders and its members, and all who enter this virtual and real synagogue to meet, to study, and to pray. Comfort the sorrowing hearts among us and heal those in anxiety or pain. May we all find here community and friendship, renewal of purpose and hope, a deeper understanding of our heritage, and a sense of your abiding presence. Bless all congregations of the House of Israel throughout the world. Let those who live under oppressive rule soon be freed, and may we all unite to witness to your truth and do your will.
Eternal God, our rock and redeemer, grant blessing to the state of Israel, created to fulfill an age-old dream and to be a haven for the oppressed. Inspire its leaders and citizens with faithfulness to the aims of its founders, to develop the land for the benefit of all its inhabitants, and to implement the prophetic ideals of liberty and justice. May they live in harmony with one another and in peace with their neighbours, and cause to come true once more the ancient vision that out of Zion shall go forth Torah and the word of God from Jerusalem.
Prayer for Ukraine. Eternal One, rock of our existence, the source and sustainer of life. As President Putin continues to wage war on Ukraine and the forces of autocracy wreak havoc and attempt to instill terror and fear in every heart, we call on you to strengthen the people of Ukraine in their collective will to muster the courage and the fortitude to withstand the onslaught, strengthened by the knowledge that democratic nations across the world stand in solidarity with them and will do everything necessary to support their efforts to resist the imposition of tyranny. Meanwhile, as ordinary people everywhere, like ourselves, witness the horror and feel helpless and hopeless in the face of overwhelming events beyond our control, we ask you to enable us to understand that we are not powerless to help, that our deeds, however small, matter, and that above all, knowing that despair is the dearest friend of tyrants, we have the obligation to hope and to demonstrate our constant fidelity to the enduring values of peace and freedom, equality and justice. May this be our will, and let us say, Amen.
On page 486. Hallelujah, Shem Adonai, Ki niskav shemo levado, Hodo Averetz v'shamayim, v'yarem keren yamo, tehila lecha hasida, livnei Yisrael, am karovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah. On 488. God's teaching is perfect.
Enlightening the soul.
God's word is unfailing.
Making wise the simple.
God's precepts are right.
Delighting the mind.
God's commandments are clear.
Enlightening the eyes.
God's doctrine is pure.
Enduring forever.
God's guidance is true.
And altogether
just. Ki lecha tov natati lachem torati al ta'azov.
Etayim hi lemakazikim ba v'tom ekeha meusha drakeha Yamein Kekedem Kadesh Yamein Kekedem Kekedem.
Please be seated. These days, I find the book of Numbers the most instructive book of the 5 in the Torah. The story of the 40 years wandering in the wilderness is not an easy story. It's a story about sin and repentance and moving on, which I think has a lot to teach us. When the people of Israel were disheartened by the report of those sent to spy out the land, as we heard a couple of weeks ago, God is angry and Moses pleads for God to forgive them, and it says God does forgive them, but God punished them anyway, condemning them to wander in the desert until they had all died out. And by the time we get to a passage we heard this morning, 38 years have passed, and virtually all those who left Egypt are gone. Miriam and Aaron and Moses are still alive, but Miriam and Aaron die in the very next chapter, part of this week's section, and Moses is soon to follow them. None of those who left Egypt, not one, will enter the land. Now, there's a very profound psychological level to this, I think. The traumatized generation escapes, but is haunted by the memories. Only the next generation can really do the building of a new society. And this is the point, this red cow ritual, between, as it were, the two generations, cleansing the new generation from their past. In life, we must not allow ourselves to be overwhelmed by death. We have to process death and grief to get on with life. But we cannot live without being aware of death and thinking about it. And that seeming contradiction is actually just the way life is. No simple answers. The red cow idea was there to help those whose duty was to deal with death to work through it so they could get on with their lives. The ritual rendered those who conducted it impure, just as a counselor might find that the grief of a client is transferred to them. It's odd, but if you think about it, it makes sense. The fact that we're able to come here this morning or tune in at home and do a little bit of Torah study is actually a privilege. The privilege that we live in a free and peaceful country where we can do it. Those running for their lives, those trapped by war or poverty or famine, don't have that privilege. In the 21st century, which arrived with such huge hopes for our world, we're beset by huge dangers. Individually and collectively, we battle with finding homes for refugees, rising prices, climate change, trying to find alternatives to plastics and fossil fuels. We thought we would live in a world of cheap food, cheap energy, low pollution, and open trade, but we don't. In that sense, we too are wandering in the desert. So what do we do as Jews? We turn every week to our Torah and we study our tradition and see what it has to teach us. And sometimes the more difficult the text, the more we have to really grapple with it to pull out the meaning, the more we can find. Since the pandemic started, the idea of being contaminated by those around us has become very familiar. Attention to detail, keeping the door open, Wearing a mask can make a difference. A single mistake could cost a life. Makes some of those odd bits in the Torah make a bit more sense. And COVID hasn't gone away, although we like to imagine that it has. There is sadly a new wave around now. But we've become tired of the restrictions and the distancing, and we feel we can't do it anymore. Such is human nature. We discard the rituals of the past, even the rituals of last week and last year, and pretend we don't need them. But COVID is still here. Infections are increasing, new cases of long COVID are arising, and the boosters and the immunity from past infections offering less protection than they were. So that's why, when there are so many great stories in this week's Torah section, I've brought you the most difficult one, a difficult one for difficult times. We don't have that red cow ritual anymore. We don't have any of those ancient sacrifices, but we've not completely moved on. Some of those ancient ideas are still with us. The Torah we just read from, it's made from an animal skin. We don't slaughter the animals just to make a Torah scroll. We use ones that have been slaughtered for food. But there it is. We still do it in that ancient way. We're not living in that distant past when strange fire was offered and red cows searched for, and we're not in that future where we reach the promised land. We're in this very tough in-between worlds. And we need our own rituals. We need our lab technicians and our scientists to keep looking for that elusive answer to COVID. We need a world built on trust with greater international cooperation, more help for those extremely poor, and a world of food and energy security. At this time of year, we started the month of Tammuz, which means we're entering the saddest time of the Jewish calendar. The book of Numbers brings its message to keep on walking through that desert. The supplies be short, the end be far, and the journey long. As the psalmist said, "Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean." And as the prophet Isaiah said, commenting on that color red, "Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow." Let us leave here then with some hope and a Shabbat Shalom to you all. Page 520, Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabbat l'adon hakol, לתת גדולה להיות בראשית, אשר שם אלוקינו לייחד את שמו, וגהור עלינו להמליך מלכותו, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשבות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד. ונאמר וחיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא, ביום
Creator of the universe, you give us life in which joys and sorrows are commingled in accordance with your wisdom, and you send death with its promise of eternal peace. Teach us to accept humbly and courageously whatever burden is laid upon us. Comfort those who mourn, and let the light of faith illumine the darkness of their sorrow with the hope of immortality. Strengthen us at all times with an unfailing trust in your providence. The community mourns the death of Ron Collins, who has passed away in Sri Lanka. We ask for comfort and courage for his family and all who mourn for him. And we think too at this time of those whose relatives passed away this season in years past. Jack Bendon, the uncle of Janet Solomon, Monty Murray, the father of Brenda Hunt, Reginald, the father of Alan Solomon, Susan, the wife of Howard Spencer, Diane, the wife of Gerald Wilton, and Sarah Wernan Klein, mother of Harry Benham. Zichronam livracha, and may their memory be for a blessing. On page 524. Yit kadam v'yikadash shemei rabba, v'yalma divra pirutei v'yamrit malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chaye kol beit Yisrael, v'hagala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei rabba v'varach v'yalam olomei alayaya, yitvarach v'yishtabach v'yitva'a v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitada v'yitarei v'yitalam shemei k'dusha v'richu, le'ela min kol v'chata v'shirata, tush v'chata v'nechanata, da'amiran v'yalma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bin Ramav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol b'nei Adam, v'imru amen. Please be seated. The funeral of Ron Collins will take place on Wednesday at 11 a.m. at Edgwarebury, and there will be prayers on Wednesday evening on Zoom at 8:15 p.m.
For formal announcements, I'd like to say a massive thank you, Michael. I'm really pleased that I asked you to lead the service and you agreed. It was absolutely wonderful service, it really was. I really loved the way you laid the Torah, and the sermon really resonated. I'm a bereavement counsellor, so what you said really does resonate with me personally. And thank you for giving us some perspective on what's going on and a bit of hope at the end as well. So thank you, Michael, but also thank you, Linda, for leading the singing, keeping us together, holding it together. Once again, in Joseph's absence, we had to look elsewhere. We know we've got a real safe pair of hands. You will be asked again. And also behind the bar, we're going to do a stock check later. Tom. But it wasn't easy, as you gathered. There was a bit of delay. This is a new venue, but we got there in the end. Thank you, Tom, for being patient and not panicking when we were worried again. It may not happen on Zoom, but we're grateful for Tom for allowing 10 screens on Zoom to be able to enjoy the service as well. We really, there's a thumbs up there from Stephen, and thank you, Stephen, for managing the Zoom at home. Again, another vital cog, and it saved me having to be involved. So thank you all round. Just for future services. Yeah, next Saturday we're back on Zoom, totally on Zoom, with Rabbi Anna from New York. So that's, again, the advantage we have of Zoom. You can, doesn't matter where you are, as long as you get a connection. And then in 2 weeks' time, we're back at the Scout Huts, where we're going to be sharing. There'll be a three-way service. No, sorry, a one-way service, but the three communities will be there. So we'll be, again, it's rehearsing for when we actually move in to the building, and I did pass there on the 142 bus. It looks nearly ready. That's all I could say. I don't know when it will be actually operational, but we're nearly there. Okay, Stephen, would you like to share your screen with any events?
Yeah, it's a sort of fairly quietish time of year because of the sort of summer period, but there are the usual rabbinic talks, one on Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock, which will be on the subject of the life cycle after life. And then there will be Tea and Torah to talk about the Sidra the next day, Wednesday, July the 6th at 11 o'clock. Both of them are on Zoom, and you can pick up the Zoom links on the website. That's all I've got to say. And thank you very much from the Zoomers, to Michael for leading the service, to Linda for the singing, and to Tom and Kevin for coping with the technological challenges from your end. Thank you all.
And my thanks to everyone as well who's taken part and helped the service once we started go really smoothly. Page 525, Adon Olam.
Adon Olam Hashem Olam. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. Right. Adon Olam Hashem Olak B'terem Kol Yitzin Nivra Liet Nasa V'Kefto Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Mi'acharei Kiklot HaKol Levado Yimlok Nora V'hu Haya V'hu Hoveh V'hu Yiyeh B'tifara Adon Olam Hashem Olak B'terem Kol Yitzin Nivra Liet Nasa V'Kefto Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Mi'acharei Kiklot HaKol Levado Yimlok Nora V'hu Haya V'hu Hoveh B'tifara V'hu Haya V'hu Hoveh B'tifara V'hu Echad V'ein Sheni Lecham Shilo L'Hachbira V'li Reshit V'li Taklit V'lo Ha'oz V'ham Yisra V'hu Eli V'chai Goali V'tzur Hevli V'eit Sarah V'hu Nisi Umanos li Menat Kosi B'yom Ekra Adon Olam Hashem Olak B'terem Kol Yitzin Nivra Liet Nasa V'Kefto Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Mi'acharei Kiklot HaKol Levado Yimlok Nora V'hu Haya V'hu Hoveh B'tifara V'hu Haya V'hu Hoveh B'tifara B'yado Av Kidruhi B'eit Ishan V'ha'ira V'imruhi Geviati Adonai li V'lo ira Adon Olam Hashem Olak B'terem Kol Yitzin Nivra Liet Nasa V'Kefto Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Mi'acharei Kiklot HaKol Levado Yimlok Nora V'hu Haya V'hu Hoveh B'tifara V'hu Haya V'hu Hoveh B'tifara Adon Olam Hashem Olak B'terem Kol Yitzin Nivra Liet Nasa V'Kefto Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Mi'acharei Kiklot HaKol Levado Yimlok Nora V'hu Haya V'hu Hoveh B'tifara V'hu Haya V'hu Hoveh B'tifara.
Please stand. Our God and God of our ancestors, bless us with the threefold benediction of the Torah. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and keep you. Ya'eh Adonai panav elecha v'yikoneka. May God look kindly upon you and be gracious to you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God reach out to you in tenderness and give you peace. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Yeah, please stay on Zoom for Kiddush. Let's see, it's hard to go from there.
Yeah, I know. What did you want, wine or grape juice?
Grape
So.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you. That reading of it, it's really tied in with the Torah reading.
Yes, I thought.
Because all that section, that left the thread, it's all in this week's Sedra later on.
Yeah.
That war with the Amorites.
Right, is it? Yes, that. Okay.
He recaps the whole story. It's so.
They try to tie them up, don't they?
Yeah, so this one ties up much better than that.
You know, not
It's probably a
I'm not I don't read music and I don't play an instrument.
Kiddush. If you're following from the book, it's on page 566. Zachor et Yom HaShabbat Lekadsho. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat La'asot et HaShabbat L'dorotam berit olam Beini u'bein b'nei Yisrael Oti le'olam Yisheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz u'bayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash. Al kain beirach Adonai et Yom HaShabbat v'yechadshehu Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hakafen.
I'm keeping the cups, folks, so don't throw them away.
Oh, did you bring them?
Yeah, and I'll wash them up and use them.
Amen.
Yeah.
No, otherwise it's a waste.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for the service.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Thanks, Alison. Shabbat Shalom to you.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Not many people.
So it has to be, have to have it the right way up.
Have a good week, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen.
Very much.
Right, I will end the Zoomers now.
Okay.
Take care, everyone.